It's all in your head. You don't look sick. Your tests are normal. It's probably anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Have you heard these words from physicians, family, and friends? If you're someone who has been struggling and swirling through the revolving door of healthcare to find answers about your health, or if you know someone who is going through this experience, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast with Laura Nozicka, a show dedicated to exploring the challenges of living with undiagnosed or rare medical conditions. This podcast explores both sides of the bedside. We will be speaking with patients who have had challenges with finding a diagnosis, along with experts in the field. I'm your host, Laura Nozicka. Please note I am not a medical professional, nor am I affiliated with any healthcare, pharmaceutical, or device company. I am an entrepreneur, and I am an independent market researcher focused on helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient perspective. The podcast is not meant to offer medical advice, but to merely share the stories and perspectives of podcast guests. Hello, it's Laura, everyone, and I am so excited about today's episode. Today is Friday, May 10th of 2024. How fast is this year going? But a whole year has gone by since I launched this podcast, so today, woo! We're celebrating the 1-year launch of the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. 1 year ago today. It's amazing. It started off as just an idea and based off of the work that I do as an independent market research moderator and facilitator, and all of these different things that I hear from patients about how difficult their diagnostic journey can be or has been. And some have truly triumphed past that. Some are still looking for a diagnosis. But I want to thank all of my guests and everyone who encouraged me to pursue this podcast. I so appreciate all of the amazing feedback. And that just means that I will be pursuing the podcast for at least another year at this point in time. But since we are celebrating milestones, there's not just one to celebrate, being the anniversary of the podcast, but we are celebrating another milestone, and that is the journey of little Mark. And his dad, Matt Ciciretti, has been on the show a couple times. Initially, he came on the show because he was desperate for a diagnosis for his son. The doctors were really having a hard time coming to a diagnosis, and luckily, finally they did. And today, 1 year ago today, when the first podcast dropped with Matt as my guest talking about Mark's journey, he is here again today for the third time to celebrate Mark's progress in his bone marrow transplant experience. And he will tell us where 11-year-old Mark is today. I am looking forward to sharing this episode with you, and can't wait for you to learn more about Mark and what he's up to now. So thank you, everyone, for listening. If you know someone who is desperate for a diagnosis or has an amazing story getting a diagnosis and they managed to navigate the healthcare system to do so, give me a shout out at Laura Marie at desperateforadiagnosis.com. Or, as I always say, I appreciate perspectives from both sides of the bedside. So if there are any healthcare professionals out there who would like to talk about a diagnostic journey or things that are happening in healthcare that affect patients getting a diagnosis or treatment, I welcome you to join me as well. But without any more time passing by here, I bring you my episode with Matt Ciciretti. Hello, and welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. I'm your host, Laura Nozicka, and I am here with return guest and Mark's SuperDad, Matt Ciciretti. He's been with us a few times before, and we'll give you a little refresher on who's Mark. But Matt, welcome to the podcast again. I appreciate you being here, and we'll tell everyone why you're here today, but just tell me how you're doing.
Hey, Laura. Thanks so much for thanks for having me back. And yeah, I'm doing really good. Um, it has been it's been such a journey the past year and a half, 2 years now. Um, but I'm really happy to be back here because I honestly believe that the the change in the journey started when you brought me on this first podcast and I started talking about everything we're going through and
Aw.
opened up so many doors of people reaching out with insight and pointed to me in directions that I wasn't even thinking of. So I'm super happy to be back here with you.
Thanks for that, Matt. Glad you're here, and that's a good teaser for everyone to be wondering. Well, if they don't know you and if they don't know Mark, we'll do a little refresher on who you are and why you're here. This is our trilogy, I think, is what we said. This is the third round here, which is really really cool. And just to give everyone a little bit of a summary of who Matt is and who's Mark, but Mark is this Wonder Boy, as I like to refer to him, with his super dad, Matt. And some of you may remember that Mark is the little boy who had this mystery, want to say blood
Well,
disorder.
it was basically
Yeah.
bone marrow failure. Like
Okay.
they didn't know where it was coming from.
Yeah. So you came on the show to literally talk about this desperate for a diagnosis moment that Mark was having. And you were desperately looking for a name for his symptoms with his frequent nosebleeds and all of the other symptoms that he had. And we talked a lot about that in the first episode. And then we found out that it had a name and the fix was a bone marrow transplant. So
Hmm.
second episode was with our friend Ryan Pena from Be the Match, and he
Yep.
talked all about what it is to be a bone marrow donor and what that process looked like and what that would mean for Mark. So here we are
And
now.
actually, Laura, if you remember, about a week before we were going to do the second episode, I had reached out because his doctor team had told us we need to find him a match for the end of the year,
Mhm.
or else we're going to be in, it's not, we're not going to be in a great spot.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, we need to hit the alarm bells. Can I get back on? And then like a few days beforehand, we got the call that he found a match. So it totally changed the tone of that second interview.
Yeah, it sure did. From this dire moment of we need help ASAP, like you said, hit the alarm bells, to this really joyous, celebratory kind of conversation, which either one would have been fine, but where we landed certainly was preferable to find out that Mark found a match, which was super exciting.
So
And so we're following up on all of that today, learning what was next for Mark and you, Matt, and your entire family, because having a bone marrow transplant is certainly not any kind of party by any means, with a lot of preparation, not only physically for Mark, but both psychologically for him and for your family as well. And I know the little guy is rocking and rolling at this point, but what I'd like to have you help explain to our listeners is what that whole journey is like. So we went through what it's like to be a bone marrow donor, but what was it like for you that, okay, we pick up where we left off, Mark got a donor, and then what happens? What happened
yeah,
after that?
yeah. So we um, once we got word that we had the donor, that kicked off the process of getting a scheduled date with the hospital. Getting a date scheduled for the transplant, getting a date scheduled for him to there was a lot of appointments that he needed to have to clear him for the procedure. Like we had to get a dental exam done because there's certain like he can't have any cavity or infection, right, in his mouth. Because getting admitted to the hospital, they admit you about a week or two early from the date of the transplant, because he had to undergo chemo and radiation to kind of wipe out everything, wipe out his immune system. So that was that was all part of the process. But what I found interesting really is you're you have to schedule a few appointments with the bone marrow transplant team, and their job really seems to be to make you cry and scare the hell out of you.
Oh,
Uh, they just, I- and I get it, and I respect it, but like their job is to scare you in telling you these are all the potential outcomes, these are the side effects, these are the things to look for. These are all the different drugs. Here's the side effects and outcomes of these drugs. Here's the chemo he's going to use, etc. Um, and I remember going in and we're sitting with our bone marrow transplant physician, and he's just hitting you with like, it felt like one bomb after the next of info. Um, but you know, I'm always one to ask questions. So, what I appreciated, and I think I had alluded to this in one of our previous interviews, is it's frustrating when you're talking to a doctor and they're like afraid to give you a hard, definitive answer or stance. And this was like one of the first physicians. He was direct. He was not afraid to answer any question, whatever the outcome was, whether it was a good answer, a bad answer, a hard answer, an easy answer. Um, and that made the conversation much more, I think, impactful, right? Because a lot of times you get doctors that they're afraid to deliver the bad news, so they kind of talk around it and they don't really take a stance or give you anything definitive, and you're left with more questions than answers. And that was, for the first time in a long time, that was not the case, and that was a very relieving part of the experience. It was tough, but it was relieving, right? The next the next real couple of steps was getting him ready, preparing him to be admitted to the hospital. So, he was admitted on November 6th, and that was for him to start, start the whole conditioning process. So um, there was a litany of, there was a few different types of, he had to do chemo, he had to get a day, he had to do one dose of radiation. And then during that time, he, we actually we actually had a bit of a scare, in that we're in there. Mark's completed his first week of conditioning. He got radiation. One of the first things he went on once we were admitted was they started him on ATG. And this is used, it prevents your immune system from like attacking your bone marrow, right? So, he had a few days of that, and he had radiation, and that was like Friday of the week of November 6th. And then we got a call that might be an issue with our donor, and they might not be able to do the transplant.
oh God.
And they assured us that their team was doing everything they can. They were trying to track down another match. The Be the Match organization's phone team was out there doing everything they could. They would let us know, Monday, because we were going into Friday, so they would let us know Monday where we stood. At the same time, they sent us, me and Mark's mom, they sent us to go get blood work done in the event that we couldn't find a match, and we had to do like a haplo-identical match, which is when you take it from, someone who is, rather than being a 10 out of a 10 match, they're like a parent can be at best like a half match.
Yep.
It's funny because different locations like Chop, like, we're in Philly, and Chop, they do a lot of cellular manipulation before the transplant. There's other places like that they specialize more in doing haploidentical matches, where rather than needing the 10 out of 10, you can get like five out of a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 match, and they still get they're able to manage that through with very similar results. So anyway, we potentially thought we were going to lose our donor. So we were starting to do every prep thing we could to keep things moving forward.
The plan,
And then
plan B,
Monday night,
plan B, in other words.
plan B through Z, we were ready to set up. And then Monday night, we got the call that that they were able to get the donor back. Apparently, they went in for testing, and they were sick with something, and they were, but team was able to get the donor back on track. So it shifted our timeline by a few days. So I think our original transplant date was supposed to be the 17th. We then shifted it to the 22nd of November. That gave them time to get more chemo, get everything, kind of in place. And yeah, so throughout this whole time too, Mark's living in the bone marrow unit of the hospital, which he was on a very isolated portion of the floor, in that there's, like I said, double doors that patients weren't allowed to go past, into even like a more open but still isolated floor. So the wing of the hospital that we were in was like locked down, like, nobody in, nobody out, without a mask, washing your hands.
Matt,
So
how did you prepare Mark for that? And how did you prepare as a family for that? Because you were slated to be living in the hospital for how long?
yeah, I mean, originally they told us to pack your bags until, February or March. The average stay for transplant, can be anywhere from like 90 to 100 days, right? So we were estimating we're going to be here till February. And it was tough. It was tough for us. It was a lot easier for Mark, because, as I had mentioned, Mark has his, it's a blessing and a curse for him, in that he cognitively is delayed in a lot of ways, but he also is extremely outgoing and social, and very intelligent as well. But he didn't necessarily associate that we're going to be living in this hospital for a long period of time. He was asking pretty regularly, almost home, almost papa home, almost papa home. He was asking for his brother. He missed his brother. He was asking for his grandparents, his stepmom, his, all of his siblings.
Matt, we learned a lot about FaceTiming, et cetera, in hospitals during COVID. Were you doing those kinds of things to still stay connected?
Absolutely. And not only that, there were so many people rooting for him, praying for him, pulling for him. I mean, we had family and friends that were, something that cheered Mark up was he loved getting videos from people that were just like, "Hey, Mark, praying for you. We hope you're doing well." I mean, I had a friend who I've known her, and her brother is my best friend. He was my best man at my wedding, and his sister, basically, who I've known our whole life, her son sent Mark a video every single day that we were in the hospital. And it got to a point he was like looking forward, like Mark would be like, like, where is it? And these videos were just, "Hey, how you doing?" Or, "Hey, I'm playing Minecraft," or, "Hey, I'm doing something goofy." But it was just like, it was so, it was so kind for me to observe, but it kept him in such good spirits. And there were a lot of people that were doing a lot for us and for him. But all that said, it was still tough.
Mhm.
You know, me and their mom were taking turns because we also somehow happened to be put in the smallest room they had just because they were busy. So there was really only room for like one parent to sleep there at any given time.
Oh boy.
So, we would take turns like every 2-3 days. One of us would go, the other would, take, like our youngest son, Eric, was spending a lot of time between grandparents' houses or spent some time with my wife and stepkids and spent a lot of time, whichever one of us was going to be home, he would bounce there. But then there were days that honestly, after 3 days in the hospital, you had to go home for a day by yourself too. So it was like, it was a real big juggling act,
Mhm.
of schedules and emotions and feelings and but we made it through. We made it through that. Um,
How did you deal with with all the feels?
phew,
Man.
I mean, it had its moments that were tough. Like, um, once the chemo happened, and it was hard for me to watch him lose his hair. Um, not for any reason other than like, you know, as a when you see someone who, has lost their hair from cancer or chemo, like whether it's judgmental or not, you look at that person and like that like they're sick,
Mhm.
and you wish they weren't, but they are. And it's hard not to look at your child and see that they're sick. Um, that's like a big visual call out that like like my child's sick. Now, granted, he was in the best possible place, getting the best possible care that worked out, but for a very short period of time, I was just struggling seeing him. It was hard. It was hard to see him without hair. And then the other challenging thing was when the pain kicked in because mucositis at the throat is a big issue from chemo. And from what I've heard, it essentially the pain is so bad, feels like you're like swallowing like actual knives down your throat, right?
Oh my. Oh
Yeah,
God.
pretty bad. So they had him on a pretty consistent morphine dosage, and watching your child on morphine is hard, you
Mm.
know. Um, I mean, grateful that there was something that could alleviate the pain for him so he didn't have to feel it. But again, kind of like without having like with the hair gone, it's just visual reminders that your child is not healthy. Um, can they can hit hard at
Right.
times,
Yeah. 'Cause
especially.
there's so many illnesses that people have and they don't look sick, which is also a double-edged sword because then people don't
Yeah.
really quite understand that they're going through something. But
Yep.
definitely to have this, like you said, visual reminder that you were in the hospital for a reason. Mark was definitely going through something very serious, very dire. Um, yeah, it had to be really rough. Did the hospital offer you social workers?
Oh yeah. I mean, God, they had everything. They had everything. I mean, there was chapel and prayer services. There was social workers. There was family support. I mean, Be the Match had offers all that stuff too. Or now they're just so we know they're NMDP now. But yeah, they did a fantastic job making us feel supported. There wasn't much we needed, you know. There
Yeah,
wasn't much that we needed in that other than just to watch our son progress and
yeah,
do well.
yeah.
So,
Did Mark react at all to his hair loss?
nah, I mean, he actually thought it was kind of cool. He- he-
I had a feeling just based on what I know about Mark that that might not have phased him or kind of maybe
didn't really phase him too much.
tickled him
Actually,
in some way.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing too is when the hair has started, like the hair, it's not fully back, but it's definitely started. It's grown back pretty, significant amount. When it was once he started to get like some little hairs in there, I remember him looking at me being like, "Papa, hair back, hair back." Like, I was like, "Yes!" Like we were excited. So I will say this: the day of the transplant is one of the most anticlimactic experiences I've ever had in my life. If you understand, like the way they describe the logistics of getting the donor cells from wherever they're at through like airplane and armored car and refrigerated and all, like, to how they walk in carrying it like it is, the Holy Grail itself. And they'll like, there's like 3 or 4 doctors all around each other and they're all checking things off, make sure everything's right. And then they take it and they hang it up like a regular transfusion bag. And it's like, all right, we're good. And you're like, what? It literally, the stem cells go in similar to like a blood transfusion.
Oh, no kidding.
So I would like, you're waiting for this like big moment. And then after they sign everything off and check it off, then, his nurse just took the bag and hung it on his rack and connected it and we're done.
It sounds like it needed a lot more ceremony around it.
It totally, like, it was, I remember
so long to get to this point and all you get is a bag hung up,
everything. I was like, once they did that, I was like, wah, wah, wah. But I mean, honestly, after everything you go through, it's kind of nice not to have the hurdle or the don't really need any more excitement at that point, right?
Yeah, yeah. So he was just sitting in a chair at that point, getting this infusion?
He was laying in his bed.
Okay.
It's funny, he had that I might have sent you the picture where he's in bed with his toy Dyson vacuum.
Yes, the vacuum.
And we were caught, and we lovingly dubbed that his support vacuum because Mark's in love and focused on vacuum toys.
Yes, I know this, and I still owe him. In fact, wait, I'll even show it on our podcast video. Yes, I still have to get Henry.
He is asking about that.
I know. Okay, so tomorrow I have time.
No.
And I'm getting Henry in the mail. But for who don't know who Henry is,
Henry,
maybe you want to explain it because he was just a computer like vacuum thing for dust and whatever. But to Mark it means
it's the world. Oh yeah. So
it's so crazy.
It's actually a really cool story too. So during the course of this, like, he found so he loves vacuums and I've bought him all the toy Dyson vacuums and apparently they're all made by this company, Kasdan, right? And they're I think Kasdan's based in the UK. Anyway, I had pictures of buying Mark the toy Dyson vacuums from this company from when he was like 3 and 4. Like he's always loved them. But
so we must have a really clean house then, Matt, if he likes vacuum.
No, because what he does is he wants to use the vacuum. So he makes a mess. He'll dump spice or something on the floor. And then you hear him go, ew, and from the next room. And you come in, he made a mess so he can clean it.
So he can clean it. Interesting.
Yeah. So you got to be careful there. But
I'm going to be real curious when he gets older how that skill will come into play at some point.
Me too. I mean, listen, any company that needs a vacuumer, I got the kid for you. But
you got the guy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So we found this video of this this vacuum line, which is a real vacuum. It's the like the Hetty and Henry Hoover vacuums. And I think that my understanding is that they're really big in the UK. They're a big brand in the UK. And Kasdan made the toy lineup, and they've been doing it for a long time. Well, the one thing that he saw it on these videos was that Kasdan made a plushie of these 2 vacuum toys. And they also somebody made the desk vacuum.
The desk vacuum, yeah. And in fact, I'm looking at it, and it does say, I believe this does say, it says Paladone Products. I'm giving a plug here, I think. But yes, made in the UK for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he fell in love with the Hetty, which is like the pink version of that. And all he wanted was like the little plushie of it. He was asking for it every day, you know. And so I started doing some research, and it turns out like they stopped making that in the it was like mostly sold in the UK, and they stopped making it like 7, 8 years prior. So it didn't even exist. The only way you could get it was like, the only way you could even possibly get it was like, overseas. Right. So I had shared a couple of posts on my LinkedIn of Mark, just like his love of the vacuums and how he was using them as support. And, in pure kind-hearted social media fashion, people were like, somebody get this kid a vacuum toy. Started sharing it around. And next thing you know, the president of Kasdan reached out to me and just said that they were really touched by our story, and they're all praying and pulling for Mark, and they wanted to send him something special. So they sent a really nice care package of their Hetty and Henry toy line, which was just wonderful for him. So, big shout outs to Kasdan in the UK, incredible company. And, didn't have to do that because we've already bought all their products other ones anyway, but they did. And it really meant a lot to him.
That's incredible, Matt. I mean, I've never seen the kind of response that you got from all of your social posts about Mark, and some of them were very heartfelt and emotional. And the fact that they went so viral, I don't know, do we still use that term? But it just skyrocketed into social media. And what did all that tell you or indicate to you about humanity? The fact that you're so respected in your industry also, that certainly helps a great deal. But what does that tell you about humans?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing it tells me is that kid is really cute.
Well, we know that we know he's a movie star. That's
he's adorable. Now, really though, I think what it said to me is that more people than you might expect really truly relate to the pain a parent can feel to watch their kids suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you think about all the different, we're so bombarded with content from all over the place that's negative or sad, or, it's supposed to be inspiring or cliche. We're at sensory overload, right? In terms of what we see and hear every day. But for this many people to, feel the need to reach out, to do something, to just, let us know they're praying for, like, I joke around, the amount of people praying for Mark during this whole journey, like, I joke, and I hope it's not blasphemous, but like God's up in heaven, like, all right, someone fix this Mark kid. He's clogging up the prayer queue. Got other people.
The prayer queue. I like that.
Like, it was just so many. It was overwhelming. But for me, it was eye-opening because I've, we gone through life, and you just kind of you keep to yourself sometimes. You keep your head down. You focus on your job, your family, your kids. Um, you don't think about other people thinking about your child or praying for your child or really caring, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, where I think most people are focused on what it's really meant for, which is business and professional
Right.
network. But it turned out it was also a great source of empathetic parents and families and organizations and people that, in a moment of time where there was no outcome determined and all we needed was hope and encouragement and prayer, it was one of the best sources to have gotten it from. And we got so much, and it was so, I'd say it was overwhelming to a degree, but I would never say it was overwhelming in a bad way.
Yeah. Didn't you say that one of the videos got like something crazy, like 20,000 views or something like that?
So
Maybe even more. I don't know, but I recall something like that.
yeah, so I posted a video on TikTok, which I'd never done before.
Oh,
Me
oh,
of
you're way ahead of me. I haven't even gotten to that point with TikTok.
Yeah, it was of me and Mark singing his favorite song in the hospital. It's from the Boss Baby sequel movie called Together We Stand. And
Aw.
it's a cute song. The words have always meant a lot to me and him. And we both, when it plays, he sticks his hand out. He wants to hold my hand while we sing it. So I just put the camera on. I meant to send it to family, and then everyone was like, "This is so beautiful. You have to share it." So I did, and it got reshared 20,000 sometimes on um on TikTok, and I don't know. I mean, I didn't really care. It was nice, but it's nice because there's more people seeing him and praying for him and
Mhm.
supporting him. But yeah, it's. I'll tell you, if we talk about my industry, I it's truly providential, I think, that I work in the industry. I do, because there were so many people who who I know from working together with them or from doing that, used every resource they could to try to get us help and get us answers, And I mean, if I'm gonna plug anybody, there's so many people I could plug, but I wanna let Pam and Wes from Rare Patient Voice know you guys are godsends, and I will always be grateful for how the support you offered. Um, you
They're the
know,
best, and I've had Pam on my podcast, so
I know you did.
they
She's
are
fantastic.
stellar people. Yes, yes, exceptional.
Um, the CFO of Good RX had reached out to me.
No kidding.
Yes,
Wow,
and
man.
I had actually, I didn't know him prior, um, and he sent us a massive, massive care box and of so many things for Mark. And let me tell you, it wasn't just he just dumped a bunch of tchotchkes and collateral into a box and sent it out. He asked questions as we were talking, and he was encouraging me, and I think he had some experience with this in the past himself. When he learned kind of how Mark was, he knew he was sending, sensory toys and poppet
Hmm.
toys and all sorts of it was
Wow.
it was amazing. It was just, there was no shortage of acts of kindness. I mean, obviously my company let me take pretty much from November through December off to focus on my son. Could never really thank Med Survey enough for that. Um, Man, it's just, when I
It's like
stop and
you're
think,
winning the Academy Award right now, Matt, wanting to thank
I
everyone
know, right?
on the list, but I won't cut you off, so you can keep going if you want.
There's just I mean, there was a family, a mother and daughter in Spain who had just been prayer and support warriors for Mark from almost the beginning of when I first posted. And this girl, this this daughter in Spain would send Mark videos almost daily as well, singing to him, dancing. I mean, he was so looking forward to it. Like, just, I could go on forever. There's so many people that, and like at the end of the day, you know, people would do things. They'd send you something, or they, you know, this one dad who reached out to me that I've developed like a friendship with. We've had lunch a couple times since I've been out. He had reached out, let us know he's praying for us, and you know, he's can't imagine what it's like to go through. He wanted to take his son out to get Mark something special and you know, as a father, I can relate wanting to set like an example of kindness to your child. So you know, we coordinated that he would drop it off at the hospital, and I met him, and oh my God, they had this box of like all these toy figures that him and his son had picked out together. And it was just like, it was creating beautiful connections outside of our family for other people. That's like, you know, you can't plan for that, but it was awesome.
It's amazing when you learn that your family's really bigger than you think it is.
Yeah.
In these situations. Yeah, for sure. That's incredible, Matt. I think Mark is going to have to put a job description on LinkedIn for publicist and
I know, right?
PR something or other. I think the kid is a rock star. He needs someone to handle all his fan mail.
He is.
I'll apply. Can I apply? I'll apply.
Yeah. Big. I mean, he's awesome in that he is just like, he's still like people are still reaching out just to see how he's doing. And, you know, I think it's also, so, you know, one of the other things that I think has been really unique about this journey is that when we had admitted him, you know, we were expecting, all right, I was there for Thanksgiving in the hospital. I had my friend Anthony from the Marlton Cherokee Band Boosters group brought me Thanksgiving dinner down.
Oh, that's so nice.
But
well, because you have let's just make sure people understand you have kids in band, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, my stepkids are in the marching band. Right?
Yep.
But he yeah, Mark had so many people around him, and we were expecting to be there until February. Well, you know, a couple of days after the transplant, when, you know, they're taking so he has the transplant, and then they're taking his levels and they're checking, and like, basically what you're seeing is like his white blood cells, his platelets, his hemoglobin, his ANC, all these counts are like 0. Like, he has no immune system whatsoever. He has none of these counts. And, you know, there was all sorts of crazy procedure. Like, we had to wash him every day with like a HIBA cleanse type cleaner. And, you know, like, hands needed to be washed regular. Like, it was serious lockdown. But within like a week and a half, his numbers started to come back. I remember the first day that we were like his white blood cell count went from 0 to 0.1. And we were like, I was like, wow, is that good? And they were like, I mean, it's just 0.1, but yeah, it's pretty early. And then next thing you know, within a couple of days, his white blood cell count was up to 1. And then, you know, his platelets were going up, and then his red blood cell, his hemoglobin was going up, and his ANC was going up. And next thing you know, his levels are back to a point where they hadn't been. We'd never seen him this high. He got back to normal, and we got discharged from the hospital within 23 days of being there.
From the target date being what?
From the date. Well, sorry, 23 days from the date of his transplant.
Okay.
Not from the date we were admitted.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be what you said, like February.
Yeah, they said that it could be up to 100. 100 days is like pretty common. So it was wild. Like, they even like look, when the world's top pediatric bone marrow specialist is pretty blown away by the progress. Something, your son's things are going pretty well. And they let us out. We got discharged before Christmas. Mark was home for Christmas. I could not think of a better Christmas gift than to have him home with us. And funny story, he really still wanted that huggable Hetty, the plushy version of the vacuum.
Yep.
And I tried to buy it on eBay, but nobody could commit to getting it shipped to us on time because of how eBay would ship it. It would have came after Christmas. So I just posted, hey, if anybody knows anyone that has one, I'll buy it. And that went viral. And next thing you know, people, friends I went to high school with who have friends out in the UK were buying it directly and like overnighting it to us from the UK themselves. So we had it. We ended up getting 3 or 4 of these things. You can't buy
Oh my gosh.
It's great though, because honestly, he sleeps with all 4 of them. He loves this vacuum toy.
That's
so
impressive.
It was just, another crazy, God shot of a moment of just we're not alone through this.
Yeah. Did you say God shot?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean for you?
To me, it's like sometimes you go through things and we have, you struggle and you got your head down and maybe you're just pushing through it or you're struggling through it. And sometimes you just get this little shot of support from your higher power, right? And to me, I've always called it a God shot, where sometimes when I feel like I'm struggling the most, something is put in my path that helps me get through it. And I don't think it's accidental.
Yeah, there are no coincidences.
It's like a shot of it's an infusion of God in the moment I need him the most.
Yeah, there are no coincidences. At least I don't think so.
I don't think so.
For a reason or in divine order or because of divine intervention. But yeah, I believe that. How cool! What a Christmas present for all of you that Mark was home way earlier than expected. So not only is he like this rock star, and a movie star and an overachiever all at the same time. Seriously, like I said, he's going to need a publicist. But some people might be wondering, Matt, does a bone marrow recipient ever get to know who their donor is?
Yeah, so sure, it happens often. They typically want, before they'll facilitate a meeting, my understanding is you need 1 year post-transplant before, Be the Match will connect you with who the donor is. And there has to be, agreement from both sides. Some people want to donate anonymously. They don't ever want to meet the person. In that case, it doesn't happen. But given that there's not a bone marrow transplant does not automatically equate to 100% success or survival rate, you also don't want to introduce the donor to the recipient a couple months in and then find out that there was a rejection issue or something tragic happened downstream. So that's why they kind of wait for that 1 year window. But I've had conversations with my friends now over at ND, and it is NMDP, National Marrow Donor Program.
Right. I heard that they did
Be the Match rebranded the more I think it I don't want to speak for them, but I think that they aligned with that name better. So anyway, NMDP, I have some great relationships and contacts and friends over there now. Rebecca Garber, for one, and she is super excited if we get to, when we get to the 1 year mark, possibly trying to coordinate with the donor. Don't want to think too far ahead, obviously, because we're still not, things are great, but they're not out of the woods yet. Sure. So we got to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
But
That might be episode 4 for us.
Yeah, right.
Who knows? That would be so cool.
Yeah, once we get to that point, I'll keep you I'll keep you posted. Yeah, absolutely. I joke around though. Whoever this person is, they're gonna have like the keys to like a Camaro waiting for them. Like I can never repay this person enough.
Well, I'm sure they were doing it for all good reasons, and nothing just to help someone who needs a transplant. I'm sure it was completely altruistic for sure. So I do hope you guys get to meet the donor. As far as the staff at CHOP, and we'll just let people know that CHOP stands for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you want to say about the staff there?
The nursing team on his floor is hands down the best nursing team I've ever. I mean, these people are. It was one was better than the next. Like that, just the entire team was incredible.
I saw that video of Mark ringing the bell when he was.
Yes, that was when he got discharged.
Yeah, they looked at those nurses and the whole team just looked amazed. They
were overjoyed.
Amazing people. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so they rotate a bunch of different nurses, you don't have like one nurse, right? Like sure. Nurses do shifts and they rotate, but it was like, you could tell everybody had a connection to Mark because we had like, he had this one nurse, Kendra, she was great, super nice too. She had him for a couple days and then she went out and then like, I guess a couple times, like it was her shift again. She'd like ask to have Mark. Like it was just, you had nurses like fighting over who got to have Mark.
Okay. Let's tack Heartbreaker onto that whole list of rock star, movie star. Yeah. The whole thing. Oh, man. Yeah. and Mark is how old now, Matt?
He is 11. He'll be 12 in October.
Okay. October, his favorite month, Halloween.
Yeah. Almost Halloween.
Yeah. He likes his Halloween, as do I, for sure.
Yeah.
So given that oh my gosh, the outreach was unbelievable for you, Matt, and your family. What do you come away with as far as what your family learned about all this outreach, or maybe how you might give back at some point in time, whatever it might be? How do you instill that into a family, and how do you pay it forward?
Yeah, honestly, since the beginning of all this, like I have not stopped thinking about like what we've been given with just being at the point we're at today. Forget tomorrow or what happens next, but just being where we're at today is a gift. And it's not a free gift. Like I firmly believe for the rest of my life that I owe, I don't know who I owe. I don't know exactly what I owe, but I can never not have a sense of there's a debt of gratitude that needs to be paid back, not just to one person, but to really, the element and the component of our society that felt passionate and inspired to reach up and try to lift us up and support us. Like there's other people, and they did that, and it meant more than people realize. And I walk away from this with a feeling of an obligation to do that myself for someone else.
And it may not be some grand gesture like donating bone marrow. It could be the smallest of things. However, we are meant to be in kindness and gratitude, or just extending ourselves to a fellow human. Doesn't have to be, like I said, as grand of a gesture as bone marrow donation, but we're all here for for
Yeah,
in service, and you certainly received that in droves, which again is incredible. And I'm sure no one expects a thing from it other than Mark's doing well and a thank you. I'm sure.
and I mean, and like you know, I have a charity that I am now personally aligned with for the rest of my life, right? Like NMDP, Be the Match. I truly believe that many of that while there was other people involved in other organizations, like they are a key part of Mark being alive today and being where he is. And without them, managing the database and getting people and doing all the efforts they do to get matches in for people in there, who knows where we'd be right now, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Right.
want whatever I can do in my capacity to help support that organization, I will do for the rest of my life. I've truly committed that to myself, and I hope they to commit it to them too in some way. But like I'm, yeah, I want to like I plan to fundraise for them however I can. I always I have like a ongoing donation page for Mark that's up that people can donate, and all the money goes right to Be the Match and NMDP.
Mm-hmm.
But I also there were a lot of people who they didn't send anything, they didn't buy or give anything. What they did was reach out and say, if you need to talk, if you have any questions, if there's anything we can do, let me know. And then they would take my call and they would listen to me and they'd share their story. And I want to extend that to anyone
Mm-hmm.
who could benefit from it, because it meant a lot to me.
Matt, I want to ask you, I'm curious, you all had a ton of support, whether it was from NMDP or the hospital itself, but you all were very much in a very isolated type of situation at the same time. So you had a tribe, but at the same time, you were in this very kind of alone moment and isolated as well, literally too, in the hospital. So anyone going through this type of situation, whether it's with kids or even if it's, an adults going through this as well, is there anything that you would say was missing from the process, or things you wish you would have had for just managing through everything?
Um, it's hard to I mean, when you think about all this, like, I think most people would just ask not having to go through it. I can wave a magic wand,
Yeah.
not have to go through this all, but that's, the reality is there's a lot that we go, I think, in life in general, that life's up and down. There's a lot of hardships. Most of them we end up doing with our smaller support network, or, our more intimate support networks, like our family. Some we end up going alone, doing it on our own in some way. But then there are experiences in life that it's not realistic to think that any one person or even one family can shoulder all of the emotional and physical and extra worldly pressures that come upon you with it. And that's where all this extra support became so impactful. So if you ask, is there anything that was missing? It's hard to answer that, because honestly, the support we got was so overwhelming, but in a good way, that, from that end of the spectrum, the cup overfloweth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Matt, as we wrap up here, what do you want everyone to know about how Mark is doing now?
So, yeah, I mean, we're in a pretty good spot. So it hasn't been without its hurdles. some of the things when they release you that we have to really focus on. Got to be really cognizant of any temperatures or fevers. Um, if he gets fever that's like 101.5, it's immediately admitted back to the hospital and in the bone marrow unit for at least 24 hours. Had a few scares there. It's tough because he can't go anywhere. He can't do anything. His brother can. His siblings can. So it's like there's a lot that we can't do with him. So, like, for instance, like church on Sundays, right? My wife takes all the kids to church. I stay home with Mark and we watch it on TV, right? Like, we watch it through like the stream because
Sure.
he can't be in that kind of crowded environment. He's got cousins that have had christenings and things like that. Someone's got to stay with him. He can't go, right? So, like, he cannot really be out in public for until his T cells get back to where they're at. So while his counts have continued to be at relatively good levels, acceptable levels, every now and then as we get our weekly blood work done, like you see, like, his white blood cells and his ANC might go down a little, but then, I mean, he's also got a bag of different, like 10 different medicines that he's taking. And some get swapped in, some get swapped out. Some are certain antibiotics at times. Most recently, the biggest, I think, concern was he's had this like cough that was kind of persistent, but really bad at night. And it was for like 2 months that he had this cough. And, we'd ask the doctors and they were like, it's probably not much, right? But then it started to get worse. Took him for an X-ray. They sent him home, and then when we got the X-ray, it turned out they think they saw pneumonia. So they brought us into the hospital and then took us for a CT scan the next day. And turns out he has a bit of a fungal infection in his lungs. It's very, very serious issue for anyone post-transplant. So we were staying in the hospital for a short period of time. Infectious disease came to see him. The bone marrow team spoke with them. We ended up putting him on posaconazole, which is an antifungal that he's been taking that since. And it's fine. I feel like I'm a mixologist. You have to like pull out, you have to like dump this powder in a cup, pull out, 9 mLs of the mixing liquid, mix it all up, and then take out 6.3, and then that's what he gets. Like it's wild. There's little things that are creeping up like that. Our team is really proactive, listening. They jump on it. They're taking everything very seriously. And we haven't had anything stick that's too concerning. But, every time you do get a little PTSD when it's like, well, we want to bring him in because his tacrolimus levels are high and we want to make sure his kidneys aren't doing something. So we want to look at that. And, he got C. diff at one point from being in the hospital. And that's a horrible experience, right? So it's like, so there's a lot. You're juggling a lot smaller balls right now. God, the kid's a superstar.
He really is. He really is. He's like an action figure, just very Teflon and resilient and total rock star. Any other final thoughts, Matt? Anything else you'd want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess first thing I'd say is that you're watching this or listening to this and you had reached out or interacted in any way to help us, I want to thank you. You were a key part of why we're here. And if there's anyone who's listening to this that's going through something similar, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I truly mean I want to be able to, I owe and I want to pay our debt to anyone who wants to collect. So if I can help even with just prayer or motivation or just experience, definitely there. But The last thing, I guess, is it can be hard, but try to it. We were lucky in that Mark always has a positive outlook, and even in like the worst of times. So I've always said I try to use where he's at as my kind of benchmark for how I should be thinking and feeling. And as a parent, I know how hard it is when the negative potential future of what's happening to our child enters our head, and it can really overwhelm us. But our kids feed off us, and just like we feed off them. And if you think about like our emotions as something that they're going to absorb and it's going to affect them in a certain way, we want it to be as positive, as strong, as healthy as possible. Easier said than done, I know, but it's when you're going through it, it's hard to keep that front and center sometimes. We were just lucky that Mark was able to be the guidepost for me to follow in terms of how to feel and think.
Well, he's an incredible little boy, and I know he's waiting for a desk vacuum from me, Henry, here. So I will be sending that to him in the next couple.
So funny. Sure. I come home from work and he goes, UPS, Papa, UPS.
UPS.
Like, he's checking UPS every day for the Henry vacuum.
That's really funny. Okay, well then I'll have to send it out through so it comes through the Mark approved channels of delivery for sure.
Yeah.
Matt. Well, Matt Ciciretti, SuperDad, Mark SuperDad, thank you so much for being with me today and walking us through Mark's entire experience and your family's experience. And it really has been a journey for all of you and one that will continue, of course. And all that I could say is that I just can't wait to see where Mark goes with all of his amazing improvement. And I wish you all God's blessings and all good things for you and your family. Matt, thank you again for being here.
Thank you. And let me just add real fast.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your support.
Well, it's my pleasure. And as far as Mark's concerned, what's not to love? I mean, come on. But and again, you too, Matt. I mean, what a testament of the kind of dad that you are and the way you've handled everything and not being afraid to put yourself out there and ask for help. I think a lot of people would feel somewhat prohibited, or embarrassed in some way to say, I need help. And you weren't afraid to do that. So I think you're an amazing example that it's okay to ask for help in a situation like this. So kudos to you all the way around.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Take good care. All right, everyone. This is another episode of the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. I'm your host, Laura Nozicka. Stay well, everyone, and keep pushing for answers.
Oh my goodness, that's a wrap on another compelling story. Thanks for listening to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. If you would like more information about today's guests or to find out more about Laura, me, go to desperateforadiagnosis.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow show updates and healthcare news on the podcast's Facebook page. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions, advice, or suggestions for our guests, please email me at lauramarie@desperateforadiagnosis.com.